Okay, welcome to the live. I'm Coach DuWayne Campbell. You're on my strength training channel, King Leo Strength, and today's topic is the 5 unshakable rules for gaining strength in the gym. Now, if you have been, strength training for any reasonable measure of time and you're not seeing the results that you want to see, there are reasons for that. And it's possible that you're violating one of these 5 unshakable rules. You may feel, like you're spinning your wheels, you're not getting any stronger no matter how hard you try, and you're putting in a lot of effort, but you're really not getting the returns that you're hoping to see. And this is something that quite a lot of new persons that are new to strength training, they will go through. However, with the guidance of a proper strength and conditioning coach and or a mentor like myself, it is very much possible for you to correct and get back on the right track. For those of you that are watching this live, because this is recorded live, there will be some recording. I'll probably put the record on one of my channels, but for those of you that are not following me, make sure that you follow, because I do these types of trainings on a weekly basis for persons who are interested in improving their strength, improving their overall coordination, their health, their well-being, and most importantly, their performance through strength and conditioning. Let's dive right in. The first unshakable rule is to prioritize progressive overload. And by progressive overload, what we mean is that you have to gradually make the exercises or the routine more difficult in order to consider seeing improvement. There are a couple of important ways that you can prioritize progressive overload in your strength training. And one of them is to increase the weight by a little bit each week or each cycle. So you could add an extra 2.5 pounds to 5 pounds between each week or each cycle. Or you might add repetitions to each cycle. You can add 1 extra rep, 2 extra rep, depending on how easy it was for you to complete your strength program in the previous cycle. Or you can add, for some people, they actually add additional sets. So for example, what that might look like is if you're adding additional weight, you may add maybe, let's say you're doing the bench press and you're at 100 pounds. I'm just using this for simplicity. You may add an additional half pound to each side of the barbell. And that actually will increase the difficulty of the exercise. Now, 1 pound might not seem like much, but remember, it is progressive overload, not maximum overload of the exercise that's important. Because if you increase by too much between cycles, you're going to get burnt out really, really fast, or you're going to find yourself injured. Adding additional reps it sounds simple enough. If you're doing 3 sets of 10, maybe you'll go 3 sets of 11 in the next week. So you're not increasing the weight that's on the bar or the weight that you're using or the resistance you're using. You're just adding an additional repetition of that exercise. And you may add an additional set, meaning you may be doing 3 sets of 10 of bicep curls, and then you go 4 sets of 10 of biceps curls in the next cycle. And that's what we mean by progressive overload. You're gradually making the exercise more difficult. There's one additional key way that you can use progressive overload to make the exercise more difficult, and that is to change the exercise to a more complex form of exercise. So maybe let's say I'm doing front squats, and in the next cycle, I change to doing single leg front squats or Bulgarian split squats. And that's going to make, it's going to give the same stimulus to all the same muscles, but it's going to make it significantly more difficult. Additionally, I can move from doing barbell upper body exercises. So I can be doing the barbell overhead press, and I can shift that to doing a dumbbell overhead press, which is significantly more difficult because now you're coordinating 2 hands moving on their own through the same arc of movement, but they don't have the coordination of one single barbell to press against. There is a common mistake that most people make when it comes to progressive overload, which is not overloading at all. That means they are doing the exact same intensity or exact same load for 3, 4 months down the line, and they think they're gonna continue to get improvements. And you're not gonna get improvements because the body is not being met with a stimulus that is more difficult for it. On the flip side, there are persons who will overload too quickly, or they progress to overload too quickly. A good rule of thumb to have is that you may ask every four, well, you can overload or increase gradually each cycle. And when you're increasing complexity, you give yourself 4 to 6 weeks to change the exercise itself. So give yourself 4 to 6 weeks of that stimulus or that exercise stimulus, and then you can change it to a more complex exercise in 4 to 6 weeks. So let's move on to rule number 2 of how you can that you would not want to violate if you're looking to improve your strength inside the gym. And rule number 2 is you must master your big lifts first, your basic lifts, your compound lifts. If you're building a house, you wouldn't want to skip the foundation of that house and start building, making the windows. You want to build the foundation and go from the ground up. And the foundation of strength training is the compound lifts. By the compound lifts, what we're talking about is your squats, your deadlifts, your bench press, your overhead press, and your pull-ups. So these are major pushing and pulling exercises, both for the upper body and the lower body. And the majority of the other exercises in strength training are built on that foundation or those foundational lifts. When you're tackling these foundational lifts, and even more some of the accessory lifts or the add-on lifts, you want to early on train with intent, meaning emphasize your form or doing the exercises correctly before adding significant weight or resistance. So you want to make sure that you're actually recruiting the correct muscle groups in the correct order, and you're moving through full range of motion. You're maintaining proper mechanics for the exercise before you go ahead and start adding lots of weight. Most times there's a gender difference here where females will spend a lot of time on the form and not add any resistance until they're prompted to do so. And I find that when I'm in the gym with like male athletes, they tend to want to pile weight on the bar and ego lift early instead of learning the proper form and making sure that their technique is right before adding, too much weight onto the bar or picking up too much weight. So you want to, one, prioritize the foundation lifts, and two, train with intent. Make sure that you are paying attention to your form. Make sure that you're paying attention to your mechanics, how well you're executing the lifts before adding significant resistance. The majority of your adaptations early in any strength training program are going to come from your nervous system being adapted to the lifts. Your nervous system is going to improve first. By that we mean the connections between your brain and your muscle and the firing of the impulses are going to be right? The firing of those impulses are going to be what is important in the initial stages. And only after about 4 to 6 weeks of being on that program are you going to start having more muscle adaptation to the program. So the first adaptation is your nervous system being basically trying to adapt to the stimulus. And then the later adaptation is your physiologic adaptation. Your muscle starts to grow, blood supply to the muscle starts to grow. Try and ensure that you stimulate the correct adaptation early on and not the incorrect adaptation in terms of the form and how you're executing the lifts. Another aspect of making sure that you master the big lifts first is to start with something simple. Start with a very simple strength training program. For example, the 5-5 program or starting strength. Starting strength is when I started being interested in strength training, that's where I started first. It's created by a coach called Mike Ripto, and it's basically just using all the basic compound lifts. So squat, deadlift, bench, and I think overhead press. or what is included in starting strength. You can purchase the book. I'll probably try and put a link later on after I've completed the live video. But starting strength is a good place to start. 5x5s as well. I'm not sure where to direct you in terms of, starting with a 5x5 program. Now we're on to the third unshakable rule that you should not break when it comes to strength training if you're trying to see improvement in the gym. And that is to nail the recovery. Make sure you're doing the correct things in between sessions, that your recovery is actually on par with the work that you're doing. So here's a common misconception that people think that the improvements that they're getting are happening while you're doing the lift. No. So every training program is designed to give your body a stimulus, and it's your adaptation to that stimulus that is going to decide whether or not you improve. Now, if you're not allowing yourself to recover in between training sessions, then you're definitely not going to adapt. No matter how much you may think you've got great genetics, or you've been doing a lot of hard work, you are still not going to be able to adapt to the program if you're not recovering in between training sessions. So you're growing actually outside of the gym more than you're growing inside of it. But that growth doesn't happen if you're not recovering. A couple of tips that's going to help you guys. Make sure that you're prioritizing sleep. 7 to 9 hours of sleep may sound like a lot, but if you really want to see the results, make sure that you put the effort in to get proper sleep hygiene, so that while you're sleeping, your body is basically creating all the correct hormonal responses and rebuilding the tissues that you've been working on inside the gym stronger and more resilient. All right. Also, you want to make sure that you are eating properly. Now, in eating properly, in terms of rebuilding muscle tissue itself, you want to consume 1 gram of protein for each pound of body weight daily. So make sure that you're consuming a gram of protein for each pound of body weight. So if you're 150 pound athlete, you want to make sure that you're having 1 pound, 1 gram of protein for each of those 150 pounds that you currently weigh. You also want to avoid junk food. And I know that this is very tempting. It's very tempting for me to have been able to limit fast foods to once per month. And in my best days, I would limit fast foods to once every 6 months or once per year. But junk food does not help very much because it's mostly empty calories. There's not a lot of vitamins or minerals in there that's going to help with the other processes that you need for training and recovery. Third important point is making sure that you have rest day. So none of this David Goggins type thing where you get up and you go train every day. David Goggins is probably like one of one. He's the only person like himself on the planet, and the majority of us are mere mortals. So you have to have some rest days in between your training days. Ideally, you want to have two rest days per week, or per training cycle minimum. And as you become more advanced, or you have additional therapy inputs, meaning you're getting your regular massage, regular chiropractic, your active recovery being done, then you can actually reduce it to 1 absolute rest day per training cycle. And now we're on to the fourth unshakable, unbreakable rule. If you're trying to see results in the gym, you have to make sure that you are abiding by these rules. Otherwise, you're going to do a lot of work, but you're not going to see your maximum results. And the fourth unshakable rule is to track everything. Track everything. So you want to track the program that you're on. You want to track the weights that you're lifting, which is essentially the result, the resistance that you're using. You want to track the sets, you want to track your repetitions, and you want to track your rate, what we call your rate of perceived exertion, or how difficult the lift feels. You want to track your sleep and nutritional habits. Make sure that you're also tracking your body weight. Not to say that if it goes up, it's bad, or if it goes down, it's bad. because there's variance in everything. So even in your heart rate has something called variability. And if the variability or variance reduces, then you're in trouble. So just being a human being on a planet, an imperfect being on an imperfect planet, you're going to find yourself sometimes where um, things are going to fluctuate for no negative reason or not no fault of your own. Accept it, but just track it. Because what you want to see is the overall patterns over time and not necessarily individual days or individual data points. So track your sleep, track your nutrition, track what you're eating, because it is whatever that you're consuming on a day-to-day basis, i.e. your nutrition, not diet, but your nutrition, that's going to decide it is available for you to create additional muscle tissue, additional nervous tissue, additional bone strength. There are lots of journals out there that you can use to help track these things. I have made a journal myself. I'll put a link to that in the description. After this, I've completed the live. I'll put a link to the description. It's available on Amazon. It's called Strength Training Journal by Coach DuWayne Campbell. You can purchase it on Amazon, or as I said before, I'll put a link to it in the video description. But additional to that, you don't necessarily have to purchase my journal. You can use like a spreadsheet. You can use your notes app. You can use Notion. You can use whatever is available to you that you can find most convenient. I just made a strength training journal to try and make it easier for the athletes that I coach to be able to track their progress. And progress, guys, progress doesn't have to be adding more weight to the bar. Progress can be being able to complete your technical workout or your event workout or your sports workout easier after completing your strength workout. So let's say, for example, your strength training days are Tuesdays and Fridays, and you go and you play tennis on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Initially you're gonna feel a little bit drained after doing a strength training and then going off to do your specific workouts. But over time, you'll find progress can simply mean you're stronger, and now you can transfer that strength over to your specific event or your specific sport. But you're not going to know these things unless you're actually tracking it. And now we're down to the final or fifth rule, unshakable, unbreakable rule. If you're trying to see results in the gym from your strength training, you cannot break this rule. And that is to stay consistent, because the results are not going to come from doing one day's workout. And the reverse is also true. Missing one day is not a training, or you're missing one gym session. It's not a reason to be down on yourself and think that, you've ruined everything, because one day in itself is not going to make or break you. But the progress over time is what's going to become important. So be consistent over the progress of weeks and months. And that is what's going to make the difference. So in your priority, you want to make sure that I care that you put an emphasis on consistency and not perfection. Consistency can mean you're showing up to the gym and actually being present on the day. So being present and doing your workouts consistently on the day, that is what you really want to be about. You don't want to try to be perfect and be too down on yourself because you're not getting it initially when you're just starting out. And even after you're seasoned in your strength training and you understand all the lifts, and if you've been lifting for 5-10 years, you don't want to be thinking like perfection is the goal. Perfection is not the goal. We are imperfect persons on an imperfect planet. All right. So what we really want to be is consistent in what we're doing and tracking the results over time. Avoid program hopping. And I was guilty of this when I was a young person. I used to buy these magazines for strength training, and I would be in them flipping through. I was like, oh, this guy does this program. I'm going to stop doing my program. I'm going to start doing his program. But the problem with that is if you're jumping from program to program, your body doesn't get a chance to adapt. And if your body's not able to adapt, then you're basically just wasting your own time, because you're not going to be able to figure out what is working for you and what is not working for you. All right, so stick to one program or plan for at least 8 to 12 weeks. That way you can track it and figure out, what your specific body is more geared towards and what produces your improvements over time. If your motivation fades, that's okay. There are lots of other factors that pop up in life that make you feel more or less motivated to stick to a program. The important part is that you stay disciplined and consistent. So you show up even when you don't feel like showing up. And remember, your strength tomorrow is going to depend on how well you're lifting today. It's not dependent on what you're doing. Well, it is dependent on what you're doing outside the gym, but it's dependent on what you're doing today. So if you want to be stronger tomorrow, you want to pay attention to what you're doing today and make sure that you're putting in the work to actually stimulate your body to get that improvement. All right, so in recapping, the 5 important factors are progressive overload, mastering your big lifts first, making sure that you're fully recovered between sessions, or as recovered as possible, tracking everything. And in terms of tracking, I have a strength training journal. I'll make sure that I list that in the description to this video. And staying consistent. All right, think long term instead of short term. We have a question. What about lactic acid threshold? Does it make you faster? Robert Edwards, thanks for the question. It's not in line with the live that we're currently doing. I can answer it. It does help you more efficient in terms of the longer running events. So it is something that you want to pay attention to if you're racing at the 800 and above. But in terms of strength training, we don't use strength training to stimulate lactic acid threshold. Those things you have to go out into the field or field lab and work on those things in your specific sport, because of course, again, that's going to be very specific to the movements that you're doing and the sport that you're doing. So for example, if I'm a swimmer and I'm working on lactic threshold by running, it's not going to give me a specific adaptation to swimming. So you're going to want to work on that, doing the specific movements and the specific sport of the specific sport. All right. So guys, thank you for being on the live. If there are any other questions regarding strength training, I'll take them now. And if not, then I'll see you again in the next live. So if you have any questions, drop them in the comments now. Robert, 100-meter sprint. Are you asking me if it makes it? No. Lactic acid threshold can't make you faster in the 100-meter sprint. It can't. It won't even factor. 100-meter sprint is finished before lactate can accumulate. Any other strength-related questions? All right, let me just scroll through the chat. Let me see if there were any other questions that I might have missed. No other questions. All right, guys, thank you for joining. And if you're not following me, make sure you follow me so that you can be on the next live regarding, strength training and how you can use strength training to improve your overall physique, improve your wellness, improve your movement qualities or life qualities, and also to improve your performance, or primarily improve your sport performance. All right, thank you for being on the live, and I'll see you in the next one.